This stream is sponsored by Brilliant.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
EDT pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger roll with Atlantis.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight downside SCE off.
Bring in SCE off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Cape Canaveral, Florida, where we're bringing you live coverage of SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket launching the Globalstar-FM15 satellite to a low Earth orbit. And isn't it strange? This doesn't feel like the first Falcon 9 launch today. It doesn't feel like the first Falcon 9 launch in the past few days. Weird, it's like we've been here before. But anyway, this is the third launch in 48 hours. Very exciting. But first off, before we dive into all of that cool information, I'd like to introduce all my co-hosts today. First off, Adrian Bile. How are you doing, Adrian?
I'm doing great. Good morning from Europe, everybody, and I'm looking forward to see a rocket fly.
It's an early morning for you there, is it not?
Yeah, it's close to 6 a.m.
Oh boy, but thanks for tuning in, Adrian. Really appreciate that. And out in the
Thanks for having me.
field, we have Chris Gebhardt. How's it going out there, Chris?
It's going mighty fine indeed. Good evening/morning, depending on your time zone.
Yeah, good evening, about to be good morning, at least for us here in the Eastern time zone. We also have Julia out there, as well as Thomas. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Another third Falcon 9 launch in just about 36 hours. And, well, no one's complaining about extra rocket launches, so glad you're all tuning in for another one.
Absolutely great to see them. And last but not least, we have Patrick Cahoon operating the webcast today. So that's our host, or our, I guess, list of co-hosts today. But we're looking for a very interesting launch tonight. A very interesting looking trajectory. So, Adrian, what's going to be happening on this launch? Why is everyone kind of talking about the trajectory here?
Well, it's a very light payload, the Globalstar second generation payload. It's 700 kilograms, if I remember it correctly, and Falcon 9 will fly, will be very much downrange for this one. It will be almost comparable to Starlink downrange with over 600 kilometers downrange. And the landing will be about 10 minutes after liftoff. And after that, we will have 3 second stages burns to bring the payload to the desired orbit. However, what we should say about the first stage burn, while it was talked about a lot, it is comparable to a similar mission from the trajectory perspective with the Formosat 5 mission that happened in August 27, that had a downrange landing after 10 minutes and 45 seconds. So while people talked about this a lot, it's also comparable to a previous mission of a very light, lofted payload.
Indeed, and I was there for Formosat's launch out of Vandenberg, and it was a very lofted trajectory indeed for that 500-ish kilogram satellite. So yeah, a similar trajectory. We should note that that doesn't necessarily preclude the possibility that something else is inside the payload fairings, but given that Globalstar, as Adrian said, is a 700 kilogram satellite, we have a trajectory that's very similar to a previously launched 500 kilogram satellite that was the only satellite on that launch. You can kind of see how this aligns, especially given that the Globalstar 2 will eventually wind up in a 1,400 kilometer orbit of the Earth, so much higher than the Falcon 9s typically go for LEO as well. So that, if you like clandestine, there might not be something in there. It might just literally be Globalstar in there tonight.
Very cool. And yeah, very interesting trajectory. So yeah, like they're saying, it's a lofted trajectory, very relatively late second stage cutoff, relatively late booster landing, about 9.5 minutes and 10 minutes respectively there. So it's going to be a very interesting launch to watch tonight. And now...
It will, and can I get one question out of the way first?
Go ahead, Chris.
Because we're going to see it at some point. There is a thunderstorm 70 kilometers north of the launch pad. Our camera is aiming north at the pad. You will eventually see lightning behind it. Lightning is far enough away that it is not a concern at this time for a liftoff at 12:27. Of course, the meteorologist at the 45th will watch that, and hopefully we will not have to make use of those 4 towers around the rocket, which are its lightning protection system. But just wanted to get that out of the way first because I know we'll probably see them in our shot, but that lightning is very, very far away. It's just high up in the atmosphere, so we can see it very clearly.
Very cool. Thank you for that information, Chris. I'm excited to maybe see some lightning in the background. And speaking of those 4 towers you just talked about, Musical Wolves here with the ever popular question, what are the 4 blinking towers? Well, as Chris just said, the 4 blinking towers, you can see those are part of the lightning protection system. Now, as Chris said, those are used, hopefully not necessary to be used tonight, but those are used to protect the launch vehicle, the launch pad, and all hardware around there from lightning strikes. Now, as Chris said, thunderstorms are kind of common down there in Florida. They happen pretty much every day. So it's pretty necessary to have lightning protection because, if lightning hits electronics, your electronics don't electronic anymore. So, or
That's my favorite description of that ever.
You could say they over electronic. But oh my god. But yeah, so you want to protect it from lightning because, as we said, lightning does not like electronics. But thank you, Musical Wolves. And also another thing I wanted to say too is this is an interactive live stream. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your feedback. If you have any questions about SpaceX, Falcon 9, this mission, toss them in the chat and we'll go through a bunch of them as we head towards T0 tonight. But also another super chat here from Unconsoled asking, during operational times, won't Starship be on 39A and SLS on 39B at the same time? Now, that's a very cool thing to visualize in my head. Chris,
Yes.
do you think we could ever see that?
I mean, eventually, yes, I do think we will see that. In terms of will they have to occupy both pads for the Artemis program? Probably not. And the reason for that is because while the lunar lander Starship will be launched into low Earth orbit, refueled with a few refueling tanker flights of Starship as well, the lunar lander will then go pre-position itself near the gateway or the location in near rectilinear halo orbit of the moon, where Orion will rendezvous and dock with it. And that sort of timing to reposition it out there, get it ready, systems checkouts, make sure it's fine is probably within the same realm as the SLS rolls out and 7 days later is ready for launch attempt number 1. So eventually, yes, they'll definitely be out there together. I mean, by happenstance, most likely. But do they need to be for Artemis? I don't know, based on the timing, at least for the Artemis 3 mission.
Very cool. And now I really want to see SLS and Starship launch at the same time. Never going to happen, extremely dangerous, but that would be pretty cool to see. But anyway.
Indeed. And I believe we do have an update here that they are go for propellant loading, and the auto sequence did indeed begin at the T-minus 35-minute mark, so Falcon 9 is propellant loading for liftoff.
Awesome, a great sign. And actually, everyone, as you're watching over the next coming minutes, you're going to start to see some condensation forming on the rocket, and you'll see some sort of small white clouds coming off of the rocket. Now, that's condensation, like I said, and it's actually similar to, say, if you have a glass of cold water on a humid summer day. The humidity in the atmosphere will condense onto the side of the glass and, make water. But with Falcon 9, the water in the glass is actually liquid oxygen, and the glass is actually aluminum tanks. Now, liquid oxygen is very, very, very cold, and because it's so cold, it actually condenses the water in the atmosphere into solid ice. So you'll see that start to boil off on the side of the tanks in the coming minutes. So it's a very cool sight to see. And from Aravale, actually, Adrian, I think this might be a good question for you. Who is ahead in the count for launches so far this year, SpaceX or China?
Well, China is at 19 with 1 Hyperbola launch and 18 Long March or Zhangzhang launches. So they are 19 accumulated, and this is Falcon 9 number 26, I think.
Yes, indeed.
Wow.
This year. So right now, SpaceX is launching more than China, but they are also having a pretty busy summer manifest. So it will be interesting to see how that develops over the next 3 to 4 months, because there are a lot of Shenzhen launches scheduled for the next 2 to 3 months.
It is also really interesting to note very quickly that it used to be, right, like Russia would be the winner every single year. And it was sort of, interesting, like in the 2000s and 20 teens, if another nation sort of had more. And we have really seen that alter and flip in the last few years in terms of the US, almost largely due to the Falcon 9. And then China as well, really ramping up their game. You can really see where the markets are sort of moving toward in terms of rapid sequence launches and what different agencies are capable of.
Yeah, China is just to add to that with Russia here. Since mentioned, Russia right now is at 9 launches this year. So they have some launches, but they are definitely not in the same amount anymore as SpaceX and China. I love, by the way, that we always compare to just SpaceX and not the United States here and China, and it's a close race.
Yeah. Yeah, one company has the flight rate of almost an entire over an entire country.
Yeah.
Wow. Very cool. Nice analyzation there, and thank you for the support there, Urvale. And then from Ryan here, saying this booster is on its 9th flight. Is that the most flown booster to do a non-Starlink mission? And that's an interesting question.
Out of my head, I can say no, because Transporter 3 was on a 10th reflight, I think.
There we go.
Gotcha. There we go. See, Adrian, you know all these statistics. It's like a spreadsheet in your head, one could say.
I wish I had a spreadsheet for that, but I just remember that somewhere in my head was like, wait, Transporter 3 was on a 10th. So,
and now you know how I answer every single space shuttle question. I don't know. It's just in my head somewhere that you pull out instantly in the moment.
Like, I know this. Wait.
It's funny, we'll be joking around with Chris, just like, I wonder if Chris knows this, and he'll just like nonchalantly say the fact, and we're like, oh, he does. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Ryan. And also Aaron here, Eric Hutchins here, 20 Canadian dollars, no message, but we really appreciate your support. And we appreciate everyone's support on the live streams. As we've said time and time again, these streams do not come cheap. The equipment, getting everyone out there, all of this, it does not come cheap. So we really, really appreciate all the support from the super chats, the members, and even just the people watching the live stream here. We really appreciate all of your support. And from Thomas here, oh, an interesting question. Do you think there will be a Falcon 9 Block 6 for a Starlink V2?
Nope.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Nope. Starlink V2 is actually tailor-made for the Starship vehicle. They're much bigger satellites, taking advantage of the payload volume in order to offer increased bandwidth from each particular spacecraft. And so I would not expect Falcon 9 to have any involvement with Starlink V2, actually. And also, Falcon 9 is not being evolved past Block 5.
Yep. Yeah, SpaceX has stated multiple times Block 5 is the last major iteration. Now, we have seen a lot of small improvements to Falcon 9 throughout Block 5. Most of them we really can't even see. There are probably a lot of internal ones, but there's no more major iterations on Falcon 9, no more major blocks. And from Musical Wolves, saying, interesting question here, will this be on the opposite side of Earth as Globalstar 1? That I'm not too sure about.
So, okay, so the naming convention for the satellite might be slightly confusing. Globalstar-2 FM15 is the full name of the spacecraft on board today's flight. Globalstar-2 simply relates to the fact that it's the second generation of Globalstar satellites. So there's a whole constellation of Globalstar-2 satellites that encompass the entire Earth. FM15 is the more specific designation for this particular spacecraft. It might be Flight Module 15 or something like that. But so Globalstar 1 was the first generation of the constellation, and there were multiple Globalstar 1 satellites, just like there's multiple Globalstar 2 satellites. So, to answer the question.
Thanks, Thomas. That's very cool. That's something I did not know. But yeah, so let's actually dive into a bit on what this satellite actually is. We've seen a lot of questions in chat. So the Globalstar satellites are actually a constellation of currently 24 voice and data relay satellites, sort of kind of like the Iridium satellites. If anyone remembers the Iridium Next constellation being launched back in, was it 2017, 2018, 2019, I think? But yeah, it's a constellation of 24 satellites. Now, this one is actually a sort of replacement or an on-orbit spare satellite, and that'll sort of tide over this existing second generation of satellites, as Thomas was saying, until they can get ready to launch their third generation of satellites coming up in 2025. So very cool here to see the satellite launching. Now, it's just, as we said earlier, it's only one satellite launching, and it's a relatively small satellite, about 700 kilograms, which is very, very light for a Falcon 9 to carry to low Earth orbit. And as we said in the beginning as well, this kind of draws a similarity to Formosat 5, which was also a very light satellite and also had a very lofty trajectory. So it'll be very interesting to see the launch happen tonight.
Yeah, I think the other thing that differs from Formosat, though, and the reason why there's some extra rumors going around about what the payloads on this flight may be, whether, Globalstar is alone, is the upper stage burns. The first stage burn, like we mentioned, pretty similar to Formosat, a lofted trajectory, but nothing entirely out of the ordinary. But when the upper stage takes 3 burns to get to where it's going and deploy Globalstar's final orbit should be around 1,400 kilometers in altitude circular. Also, there shouldn't be any plane change maneuvers expected. The inclination is about 52 degrees, and that's the trajectory that the hazard zones have indicated as well. So it is pretty standard for these flights to need 2 burns sometimes, especially since it's a little higher than a standard LEO. But 3 burns is very weird. And so obviously there could be other explanations for this, but that's what has kind of prompted the idea of a possible explanation of a unannounced rideshare payload.
And a 50-minute coast after that initial orbit insertion into LEO is also fairly odd, because you're not over the equator at that point in a LEO trajectory. So it's kind of odd.
Yeah. You're actually showing the mission timeline on your screen right now, and that shows that first coast phase is around 50 minutes or so. There's a very brief, I think, an 8-second burn, and then another 45-minute coast phase prior to a 4-second burn. So those are 2 very short burns. The second and third burns are very short. Of course, at that point in the flight, after completing 1 entire burn already, the upper stage will be very light. There won't be that much propellant left on board. So you can imagine the accelerations that come from those very short burns. We've seen even shorter, too, sometimes trajectories where they break it into 2 burns. The second burn is literally a second long. So, and like so short that the engine doesn't even fully start, So that's not, that particular part isn't super out of the ordinary either. It's just a weird trajectory, doing all of this for one satellite, basically. But there's also a type of satellite that we haven't seen launched in a very long time. So I would love to, we're going to hope to get some more official announcements or updates on the ascent trajectory. Of course, for our coverage will continue up through that first stage, upper stage burn. And after that, we'll be relying on SpaceX to provide official updates on the status of the mission. So maybe that will provide some more insight into what exactly the rocket is doing during all that time. But the spacecraft separation, and like we just mentioned, doesn't actually happen until almost 2 hours after liftoff. So we will stay tuned for those updates.
Very cool. Thank you, Thomas. And while we were discussing that, actually, you can start to see some condensation forming on the side of Falcon 9. Now, towards the bottom of the transporter that you can see there, you can see on the right side some small white gas clouds coming off. And like I explained before, that is condensation from the water vapor in the air that condenses onto the side of the vehicle and then later evaporates back off. So you're seeing some little clouds of water vapor there. Totally normal, totally fine. Good sign that fueling is continuing. Now hopping back into questions. From a question here from Redacted, interesting username, but saying, how many aspects of this launch are reused? So we talked about the booster being reused. Do we know if the fairing halves here are being reused?
I do not believe SpaceX has announced anything regarding fairing reuse, but they've also kind of just stopped talking about it. So the fairings could be reused, and in all honesty, they probably are, but we don't have official confirmation one way or the other.
And
Gotcha.
yeah, and the fact that they've just sort of stopped talking about it isn't an indication that they're not doing it. They are still being reused. They are still hitting their own milestones. They just sort of fairings are fairings at this point. It's kind of what it's at. Yeah.
Yeah. I know
Yeah,
it's disappointing. Go ahead.
Since we're talking about reuse, we should maybe mention what this booster already did, because it had quite a manifest so far with Crew 1, Crew 2, CRS-23, XP, and 1 Starlink mission, 2 transporter missions. So lots of different missions and customers on this booster so far.
A very eclectic set of missions for this booster that aren't just like, here's 80 Starlinks and 1 other. This is actually a booster. Yeah, 2 crew flights, a cargo flight, the transporters, XP for science. Yeah, this booster's seen some stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Usually when you open these reuse statistics...
And we don't even fully know what it's adding to its resume on this flight, so...
Nice.
Usually you open these reuse statistics and it's like, hey, there's 1 mission and 6 Starlings. Cool.
Yep. Ugh.
But
yeah, very cool. And go ahead, Chris.
No. Go. Sorry. Go ahead, Ian.
I was just gonna move on to the next question here.
Go for it.
From Roscoe here saying, is this the second launch from Pad 40? And I assume they're meaning the second launch over the past few days. Is this the second launch of 40?
No. The 3 in the 36 hours, this being the third of the 3, all went from the 3 different pads. So the Starlink on Friday went from 39A, and then Sarah 1 this morning went from Vandenberg and Slick 4 East out there.
Very
and
cool.
Now we are on Pad 40 back at the Cape.
That's so neat.
And the last 40 launch was Neilsat 301, right?
Yes.
About 10 days ago.
Yep, so relatively quick pad turnaround there. And again, that's demonstrating how good SpaceX has gotten at not only pad turnarounds, but like we said, booster turnarounds. But very cool here to see such rapid progress in the past 48 hours. And can we discuss real quick, how cool is it that they've had 3 launches in just 48 hours? And someone in chat was saying closer to 36 hours. That's just remarkable at how
it really
good
is.
SpaceX has gotten.
It really is, because the Starlink launch was just after noon, and now we're just after midnight, so just about 36 hours. It really is incredible. Of course, as we watch the T-minus 20-minute vent occurring, our big visual milestone that everything is progressing smoothly in the countdown. We'll come back to that in a second. But 3 and 36, they are really improving their cadence and the amount that they're willing to salvo off of their launch facilities here when they have that opportunity and when they have that manifest need.
Yeah, just to put that in perspective, my God, I need coffee. If you look at that number 3 launches, you're talking about how many launch of Astra were this year so far, or Atlas, or Electron. These are all at 3 right now. So you have these completely other rockets that are doing 3 so far this year, which is usually that's normal. And then you have Falcon 9 being like, no, I do that on a weekend. And that's like, it's a bit, crazy.
I do that on a weekend. There's another shirt idea. I love it. But just in case you are, this is the first Falcon 9 launch that you have seen, and you are just joining us, or you join us usually later, and you're going, "What are those what's that vent from the rocket?" Basically, it has to do with the way that the Falcon 9 fuels itself for launch. The second stage is filled first with RP-1 kerosene, and then they have to purge the transporter erector, switching all of that over to get ready to load liquid oxygen into the second stage. And that begins at T-minus 16 seconds. So this is the purge vent that you are seeing, very normal, and it basically lets us know that Falcon 9 is happy and healthy on its launch pad.
Awesome. And great indication there that launch is, that we still are go for launch. And going through some super chats here. First off, from Multi-Space Industries, another regular on the show, saying hashtag Thomas Fan Club. And agreed, Thomas Fan Club.
Thanks, Multi-Space.
Nice. And from Chris K here, $5 super chat saying coffee fund for Adrian. I'm sure he appreciates that.
Yes.
And Samwise here, $4.99 with no message, but we still equally appreciate all your support. Thank you. And West Coast Film saying Canadian Deathgrass Club. Not sure what that means.
Oh my gosh, that is a joke from I think that was our rollout stream. Or maybe it was the Starlink stream, but Canadian Deathgrass came from a stream earlier in the week.
No, that
yes.
was the environmental assessment stream.
That was okay.
Yeah, we joked about Canadian Deathgrass there.
You people and your references that I don't understand. And up next, thanks to Silly String Parfait for gifting 5 memberships to the channel, saying more members equals more fun. Thank you very much for that. We really appreciate that. And yeah, membership gifting is a new feature that YouTube recently added. We really appreciate all the support through that, and you can kind of share the love using those. But thank you very much, Silly String. We really appreciate that. And from Sandy AP with 698 SGD. Pardon my ignorance, but do we know what SGD are in terms of currency?
SGD are Singapore dollars.
Oh, very cool. But they're saying, can Western SAT companies choose to do a Chinese launch, or are they stuck with Falcon 9 if they want a cheap launch, especially for large satellites? And I think the answer to that is no. They can, or they're not stuck with Falcon 9. They can do Chinese launches. I think we've had, there was a company, I can't remember it, but there have been American launches on Chinese rockets, if I do remember correctly. Does anyone know otherwise?
There have been. Europe is a little more common.
Okay.
But in general, it depends on what the satellite is. Like a totally not classified telecommunications satellite, sure, doesn't matter. European military satellite, that's going to go on a European rocket. U.S. military,
Or a Falcon 9, as we saw this morning.
Well, or Falcon 9, yes. Yeah. With Sarah 1. But like that's sort of where that's going to stretch. If you're not going to be on one of your rockets, you're going to be on an ally's rocket. If it's got some type of clandestine element to it, yeah.
Very cool.
By the way, since I, as a German, was not on a broadcast of a German satellite because I had no time, I wanted to just say woo, and that's it.
Nice, Adrian. Thank you very much.
You missed some very powerful sonic booms.
Really? Oh, I haven't watched it yet. Then I need to rewatch. I was sadly not available at that time.
And in the back channel, I'm being told we just heard that Stage 2 is going for LOX load. So Stage 2 is now being loaded with liquid oxygen, and this is done relatively close to T0 to minimize the amount of boil-off inside the tank and minimize the amount that the oxygen will warm up. Because as things get colder, they get denser, and denser means more of it in your tank, so you want to have as much liquid oxygen as possible. So LOX load is starting on Stage 2. Again, all looks great on a liftoff just over 14 minutes away from now. But hopping back into the super chat queue from S. Roger saying, launch cookie ingredients fun for Julia, and please discuss fleet. And I wish Julia was here on comm. She had a bit of comm issues earlier when we were checking out all our signals, but actually there's fleet cam right there. Beautiful. But unfortunately, Julia's not here. But yeah, let's discuss the fleet for this mission. So we have, just read the instructions, about 630 kilometers downrange. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And this mission is doing...
Yes, indeed. Which is about a nominal distance.
Yeah, that's about normal for for a lot of the downrange missions. So pretty normal recovery here on a downrange drone ship landing. But thank you, S. Roger, and we really appreciate the support. And from Chris Reynolds, just with a very simple, love you guys and keep up the great work. Well, thank you very much, Chris. We appreciate that. And LB saying, are all of China's boosters ending up in the ocean?
No.
Yeah,
no.
I wish.
Yeah.
No.
Go ahead, Adrian.
Yeah, especially in the more land-based spaceports of China, they are sadly not going into the ocean, but are dropping in populated areas, which is the worst thing you could do, and I don't like it. And I wish it was not the case, and I hope they will not do that in the future. But yes,
Yeah.
China sadly drops rocket stages over populated areas.
Unfortunate. And before we hop back into the super chats, Joshua here has a great question, and I want to actually tackle this before liftoff, so we can give people time. Where will this launch be seen from? So this launch is heading up the northeast
good
corridor.
question.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Like you were saying, headed northeast. So the eastern seaboard of the United States has a pretty good shot at seeing this. If your sky is clear and unobstructed by clouds, you should be able to see the ascent. Even the second stage should be a pretty fast-moving dot of light on the horizon and in the sky as it heads up. And if you are in Florida, Georgia, or the Carolinas, maybe parts of southern and coastal Virginia, you have a shot of seeing the entry burn, as well as the first stage heads for Just Read the Instructions, which is stationed off the coast of Charleston. Off the coast of North Carolina. Yeah.
Very cool. And I can personally vouch for that. The launch actually would be visible for me. So I live in Pennsylvania, which is quite a bit north, but still on missions such as Starlink, CRS, crew missions, and a mission like this tonight, I would be able to see it. Unfortunately, I can't drag my desktop computer outside during the live stream to commentate from outside and see the launch. But if you're anywhere along the east coast of the US, take a look outside, southeast, in that general vicinity. You probably won't miss it. It is a beautiful sight to see a second stage burning.
The US gets 3 cool launches in one weekend, and what Europe gets is a heat wave. Cool.
Sorry, Adrian.
It's all good.
And we have a $1 super chat from Jesse here. We would appreciate that, Jesse. Thank you very much. From Bob here saying, thanks for all your outstanding coverage. Enjoying the third Falcon 9 launch this weekend while unfortunately quarantining. Well, Bob, we hope that you're okay, and we hope that you have a quick recovery, but thank you very much for the support, Bob. We appreciate that. And we hope that we're able to bring you some entertainment during this unfortunate time. And from Thomas here, 999, saying, obviously, a capsule gets very hot during reentry, but how quickly does it cool down after it gets to the bulk of reentry? Is it too hot for concern of the recovery crews? Do we know that? Chris, maybe? Is a capsule kind of too hot to touch by the recovery crews?
No, capsules the thermal protection systems will cool it down fairly quickly. In fact, quite a bit of the thermal protection systems that we use can be glowing red hot, and you can touch them, and they will not burn you. So, no, they cool down very, very quickly for worker safety and things like that.
Cool, very cool. And before we move on to more super chats, I'd like to thank Brilliant for sponsoring this live stream. Now, Brilliant is an online interactive learning platform. Now, interactive learning has actually been proven to be the best way to learn a lot of topics. So Brilliant has a lot of courses in science, physics, math, and more. Now, each lesson has a lot of quick questions and hands-on examples. And if you get a question wrong, they give you a detailed explanation on how to find the answer. Now, one lesson I've actually been working on recently is scientific thinking, as you can see here. Now, as you can guess, having a scientific mind is a big benefit for anyone working on rockets. Now, one interactive diagram you could actually see here on your screen relates to gears. Being able to manipulate being able to manipulate the gears yourself can really help you with the reading check question later on. Now, with Brilliant, you can start learning for free, and the first 200 users to use our code NASA Spaceflight get 200% off an annual premium subscription. Now, again, that's brilliant.org/NASA Spaceflight, and we'd like to thank Brilliant for sponsoring this live stream. Now, hopping back into Super Chats, from Mr. Friendly B saying, oh, this is a direct question to me, saying, Ian, now you thought at the end of last year no booster would have 15 flights by the end of 2022, and is that still the case? You're putting me on the spot here. I'm getting cornered here.
What article of clothing are you going to bet, Ian?
Oh boy, I could see them launching 15 flights this year. I could see it. I did not expect them to get this quick with it, but I could see them doing 15 flights by the end of this year.
I would be surprised if they didn't. They hit, what, 13?
Yeah, they hit
Friday?
13.
And it's only June?
I love how we are at the point where our viewers are like, hey, you said this thing like half a year
Yeah.
ago on stream. Mate,
that's-
you might be wrong.
I remember
that booster, assuming nothing happens to it, should hit 17 at least by the end of the year.
Yeah, I could see 17. But
Which kind of closes are you betting that on, Thomas?
Oh, I've learned a long time ago to stop betting about rocket launch stuff, so we're not going there.
I'll remind you.
And onto our next question here, we have Mist Solar saying, "What determines drone ship landing versus RTLS?" Adrian, or Chris, actually, you could take this one.
Oh, I don't care who answers it. That's just a good question. Yeah.
Can I answer it?
Sure, Thomas, take it.
So there's a couple considerations that go into what the recovery method for stage 1 will be. For most flights, it comes down to two things: the orbit that it's going into, and the payload, I should say, and then the weight, the mass of the payload. So today's flight, 700 kilograms. That's a relatively light payload, and it is going at around 1,400 kilometers eventually, which is higher than a standard low Earth orbit, but it is obviously much lower than a geostationary orbit, for example. So those two factors, generally speaking, would usually combine for some sort of return to launch site or very short distance downrange recovery on a drone ship. Of course, if you look at the mission timeline for this, you remember that the upper stage is doing 3 different burns. So whatever the requirements for those burns are, that is probably why the drone ship recovery comes into play today, because the upper stage needs to be reserving a lot of fuel for those 3 maneuvers that are planned. So it's not always a result of only payload mass in orbit. If you look at something like the STP-2 mission on Falcon Heavy a couple years ago, those payloads weren't actually that heavy. However, they were going to like 3 or 4 different orbits. So the upper stage needed fuel to do all of that maneuvering. So you can kind of add that fuel mass to your payload mass, and all of a sudden you need to recover the center core at the farthest downrange distance, I think, of any free attempt yet. So and it needs to be a Falcon Heavy. So those kind of requirements are what drive the recovery modes for different SpaceX missions.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Thomas. And a question from Outdoorsman here, something that's actually been talked about a bit. Will Slick 40 have a mobile service tower, or MST, for vertical integration of payloads, but also crew flights? That's an interesting question. So we've heard about a mobile service, or we've heard about crew access at 40 as a possible backup. Thomas, what's up with that?
Yeah, it's one of the contingencies that's being looked at with regarding potential effects of Starship operations at 39A. Basically, NASA and related authorities want to make sure that they're protected against the increased risk from new Starship operations at 39A, as that is the only crew launch pad currently operational here at Cape Canaveral. Of course, pad 41 will be joining shortly, and 39B not long after that. But right now is the only one, and in order to protect that asset, the idea of adding crew launch capability to 40 is certainly an option. As far as vertical integration, however, I don't think we've heard anything regarding that. Vertical integration is a capability SpaceX plans to add to 39A with a mobile service tower, and that's part of the National Security Space Launch Program. Them winning that award came with the condition that they would do that. But I don't think we've heard any indications that that is in the works at Pad 40. Doesn't mean it couldn't someday, but I don't think we've heard anything to that extent.
Correct. And the reason A is the pad and not 40 is because A is the one where Falcon Heavies can launch, and they are integral for national security space launch missions like that. So that's why you would put it at A.
And just to add to that, I really get the statements, because if you look at our flyovers, where they are building the Starship pad right now at 39A, it's kind of close to the whole facility that is able to launch crew. Like, it's basically next door. And that they will launch a 60, 70 meganewton rocket there?
Yeah, very big rocket. Yeah, I'd be worried about that damaging anything, but again, we'll have to see what they choose, what NASA wants them to do. Again, this also comes down a lot to NASA. NASA could straight up say, we want you to build a new tower. We're not comfortable with all of this, but again, we'll have to see exactly what happens.
Oh, wait, but that would change every question, because then we would have to answer the question, what are these 5 4s are for?
I could tell what that statement was going to be as soon as you started talking. Oh dear. But as we're coming up here on T-minus 3 minutes.
Right.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Yep. Oh no. You were going for the same thing I was.
Yep. But as we're coming up here on T-minus 3 minutes to liftoff, let's kind of guide through some of the things that we're going to be seeing here as we approach liftoff and directly after. So now, actually, as we saw about a minute and a half ago, the transporter erector, which is the large gray truss-looking structure next to the rocket, that is rotated away about 1.5 degrees, I believe. That's to slightly get it out of the way before it rapidly retracts before launch. Now it gets out of the way before launch so that it doesn't get damaged by the engine exhaust because, fire and stuff that shouldn't be burned do not mix well. You don't want to burn your launch pad on liftoff. But at T-minus 1 minute, the rocket's flight computers are going to take over the count. Now at that point, the stage is going to begin to get pressurized and get ready for flight. We'll get the final go for launch around this time as well. And then at around T-minus 10 seconds, we're going to be the vehicle is going to get finally pressurized and ready for launch. Now, about 3 seconds before launch, we're going to have the 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite on the base of the first stage, followed at T-minus 0 by liftoff. Now, about a minute or so into flight here, we're going to see max Q, and then we'll guide you through liftoff from there. But just under 2 minutes away from launch, very excited to see the launch tonight. Let's do a few more last-minute questions just before liftoff. And now, Christ Resonance here asking, any updates on the USSF missions that will fly on Falcon Heavy? So yeah, there will be a few United States Space Force missions, semi-classified missions. They're kind of a weird flux state of classified and not classified that are set to go in the next coming months. And actually, before I get to answering that, we could see the transporter here is venting some of the final propellants from itself before liftoff. Now, like we said before, you want to make sure that your pad is as safe as possible during liftoff. You want to get rid of any excess propellants so you don't have any risk of a fire or an explosion or anything that could damage your pad hardware. Because SpaceX is really trying to get rapid turnarounds on both the vehicle and the pad, you don't want to damage your launch pad when you lift off with your rocket. Back to the question here with the USSF missions. Have we heard anything about those? There's been a lot of delays there. Thomas or Chris, can you take this question?
I can take it, says Thomas will be tracking here in just a couple of seconds.
Gotcha.
We have not had major information come out about them. We do know that they are all sort of continuing to bunch toward the end of the year, and SpaceX is continuing to make progress in getting the Falcon Heavy center cores and side cores ready for them. But aside from that, no, a lot of it is still up to the U.S. Space Force in terms of how they wish to reshuffle all of this. And we did see a lot of those missions start to become more iffy on the manifest after the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Awesome. And we're coming up on T-minus 15 seconds here, not 15 minutes. And at T-minus 10 seconds, the vehicle is now preparing itself for flight. And we'll see engine ignition in just a few seconds here. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a beautiful liftoff from Pad 40.
There we go.
And liftoff of the Falcon 9, carrying Globalstar-FM15 to orbit. Now in a few seconds here, you'll start to hear the audio. Now Chris, Thomas, and the gang are a few miles away from the launch site, so you won't get audio immediately. There, Falcon 9 lifting off, just going through maximum dynamic pressure right now, which is the moment of maximum aerodynamic stress on the vehicle. Now you saw there just about a few seconds ago some vapor cones coming off the vehicle. Those are kind of a rare sight, but very cool to see. Now, all seems to be going well on this flight, and one neat thing that I always love seeing during these launches, if as you look at the engine plume over the next few seconds, you'll see it to start to expand and get wider and wider. Now, this is because the vehicle is getting higher and higher in Earth's atmosphere, and because there's less pressure up there, the engine plumes can begin to expand. You're actually able to see that right now. The plumes are getting much wider, something I love to see on every launch.
Yes, and this first stage burn will go on until 2 minutes and 31 seconds. So about 30 seconds to go here. And after that, we will see the first stage detach from the second stage. And yeah, here you can see the expansion of the plume. That looks gorgeous.
That is gorgeous. This is one of my favorite parts of launch because it's just the colors and just the visuals and everything. Beautiful. Now we're coming up on about 15 seconds away from main engine cutoff, where those 9 engines on the first stage will shut down, the stages will then separate, and the second stage's Merlin 1D engine, Merlin 1D vacuum engine, will ignite.
Indeed, and we just saw that stage cutoff here from the Cape.
Beautiful.
And we can see the ignition of the second stage engine.
Beautiful, and there it is. The second stage engine has ignited. Now, this is the beginning of the about 6 to 7 minute long second stage burn, which will get Globalstar into a low Earth orbit, a parking orbit. Now, this is a very lofted trajectory, like we said before, so this will kind of be...
There's a jellyfish.
Oh.
There is a jellyfish. It's very, very faint, but there is a jellyfish from the moon.
Wow.
Fantastic.
I hate to say it, but I can't quite see it on my screen here.
Yeah, you can see it with the naked eye, but yeah, it's a little bit hard to pick out on some of the tracking cameras, but it's there.
Beautiful.
Today.
And again, to anyone who's on the U.S. East Coast, from Florida to, honestly, up to Maine, go outside, look to the southeast if it is clear. You will see the second stage plume. It looks sort of like a U-shape, a gray U-shape going across the sky, about the same speed as an airplane. Beautiful sight to see if you're able to see it. And we got some onboard shots here from the first stage. You can see kind of the silhouette of the grid fins, but the lights in the background are Florida. Now, I believe the main large light in the center there is Orlando.
What we also should say is that SpaceX confirmed that there will be no views of the second stage, it seems.
Interesting. Okay. Now, we did discuss before, this kind of is a strange mission here. There's been no confirmation or denial as to exactly what's going on, but there's just a few things up that kind of signal towards a secondary payload. But again, there's been no official confirmation on this, and there likely will be no official confirmation either way.
Yeah, but not showing the top of but very specifically calling out that they're not going to be showing the payload area of the second stage is an indication that a customer has made that request, and we definitely know what the Globalstars look like. So why would Globalstar make that request?
Yes.
Yeah, the fact that we do not get any second stage views at all is, I would say, a heavy implication that there is something else in this payload fairing that is not this Globalstar payload.
Indeed, and as we continue to await the first stage doing its thing and reigniting its engines for the entry burn, which again will come very much later in the flight. Worth noting again and recalling that 50-minute, 50 long coast phase that the second stage will do once it reaches its initial orbit. That's a little weird if you're just doing a burn to get your primary payload into its proper orbit. That's less weird if you have something else you need to drop off in the initial orbit and then raise your orbit for Globalstar.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong here, but we will there's a good chance we will find out that there was something else on this, because people will probably be able to track more than one object in space after this launch that is appearing.
Yes, and at a certain point, the U.S. forces would release that because that becomes an object that needs to be tracked by other rocket and satellite providers as well.
Yes.
But worth noting that what we mean by secondary payload doesn't mean it has to be a huge, gigantic, clandestine thing from the NRO. It could be a CubeSat from the National Reconnaissance Office or the DoD as well, and a technology demonstrator. We don't know, but again, signs are definitely pointing toward there's something else on this aside from Globalstar.
Can we casually mention that Thomas is still tracking the second stage?
I was about to say that when you were done talking. Oh,
he is doing an epic job, and his concentration is to be applauded here. Yes, tracking that second stage as it continues its ascent into orbit, and then coming up here momentarily, we should visually be able to see the entry burn from here as well. On clear nights, you can see it. Yep.
And I'd also
The
like to
entry
add
burn
that
is about a minute away still, I think.
Yeah, it's very late. Yeah.
8 minutes and 10 seconds. That's
Also,
late.
I'd like to add that Thomas is not only tracking the second stage, but he's tracking the second stage when it's 370 kilometers up.
Yes.
That is incredible to me. And that just shows how high up the stage is right now. The first stage is an apogee of 200 kilometers, which is very high for the first stage. Alex actually in our back channel was saying that's the third highest apogee that a first stage has hit. But
it is definitely getting fainter and fainter in my viewfinder here. I'll try to keep it as long as I can, especially considering that's the only view of stage 2 we're getting right now. But I have a feeling if it gets too much fainter, I'll go ahead and look for the entry burn, which we can also sometimes see on these clear nights.
Very cool. You're doing tremendous work out there, Thomas. And again, that second stage is 400 kilometers up right now. That is crazy. And again, as we said, about 30 seconds or so away from the entry burn of Falcon 9.
You can really see how high this second stage is.
Right on cue.
Going.
I think that's the end of stage 2 from here. I think
entry burn.
And right on cue.
Yeah, and we can see the entry burn perfect from here, low on the horizon and dropping behind some clouds. But yeah, we saw it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and again, worth noting, this is the third of 3 launches in 36 hours, just barely over 36 hours, 12:08 p.m. to 12:27 a.m., Friday to Sunday here. So wonderful cadence here by SpaceX launching these 3 missions.
Amazing. And I think maybe it's my eyes deceiving me, but it looked like we may have had some re-entry heating on the base of the first stage there. Again, that could have just been leftover engine exhaust coming out, but again, about a minute away from first stage landing right here.
Thank you of Dave Dad's favorite shot, bingo, because there it is.
Oh, love that shot.
And
I know what my job is.
And there's Falcon 9 re-entering right now and getting ready to do the landing burn. You can see the grid fins.
The right grid fin's actually glowing a little red, it looks like. Unless my eyes
which would not be uncommon on high energy reentries. They have glowed before.
Yeah, this is a very strenuous reentry for this first stage because it's not that far down range, but coming in that steep is very high in terms of forces and heating on that stage. So this is a pretty strenuous mission here for the stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had the same problem with my Kerbal reusability. It always got too hot doing re-entry. But in Kerbal, I can just set down the difficulty if it gets too annoying.
And
here we go.
First stage landing burn has begun.
Let's see if they get it.
Now again, we're targeting a downrange landing on the drone ship. Just read the instructions, and there it is.
There it is. Look at that.
That looks
through the
good.
clouds.
Landing legs have deployed.
And
wow,
like we have a landing.
Touchdown.
Beautiful.
Like smooth, like cutting butter. Wow.
Oh.
That was lovely.
Never gets old.
No, that was like a little off center, though.
Yeah, I was just about to say. I'm not impressed.
Thomas, your reusable rocket stage landed 1 meter off. Please correct.
Thomas is the one judge holding up a 9 instead of a 10.
Like with a not impressed face, like being like, yeah, I mean, it's off.
But
everybody's a critic.
Yeah. So everyone's a critic. But I mean, we should also note that was the 26th Falcon 9 launch of the year, the third within 36 hours. We have talked about the fact that they've done 26. The next closest is 3 in terms of rocket families for the year. And on track, I believe Alex's calculations meant that they're on track for 52. 52-54 this year.
Wow.
If they can get it off, and again, we'll update that if they can get the others that they've got planned in June off the ground. They could definitely eke closer to that 60 that Elon had talked about, but they are definitely on track to break some more records as we keep going here this year.
Oh, that was a beautiful liftoff there. Great tracking there from Thomas out in the field. And a beautiful shot here of pad 40 after a successful liftoff. Now, I'd like to run through some super chats before we close up here. From William, we had a $10 super chat, no message. Appreciate that, William. Thank you very much. And Matt here saying Happy Father's Day to Happy Father's Day and thanks for the coverage, NSF. Thank you very much, and Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. And Jim saying spark this candle. Well, it seems like they did spark that candle. That was a beautiful liftoff there. And a new membership here from HDW Junkie. Thank you very much. And as well as I saw here, we had some super chat gifting from Dougal in chat. Thank you very much for that, Dougal. We appreciate that. And again, as we said, gifting memberships is a new feature that YouTube has provided that lets you share the fun, sort of share the memberships. There are a lot of perks available for our members, including our members-only Discord, which is fun to hang out in. But Hamster Space Nerd saying, here's some coffee money for y'all, and they're going to need one soon too. I agree. It is 12:40 here. But on that note, Chris and Thomas are going to need to wrap up their feed, but we really appreciate them being able to give us some beautiful live views of the pad. And there's a view from FleetCam showing the successful SpaceX fleet, which is absolutely essential to missions like these. And Jerwa again saying they're watching from the Philippines. Probably too far to see it. Yeah, probably a little too far to see it, but we appreciate your support there. And Ron again with the Father's Day message. Happy Father's Day. Thank you very much. We really appreciate all the support there. And from Matt here, $1.99. No message, but again, we really appreciate the support. And Nikon's in space saying an AC fund for Adrian and his heat wave. How you holding up there, Adrian?
Well, it's right now we are getting close to 7 a.m. and I'm pretty sure I'm above 30 at this point in my apartment. So,
oh dear.
Yeah, not great. I don't like heat. That's a storm on FleetCam. I really don't like heat, and I would love if we could just don't have it.
Yeah. Actually, while you're talking there's a thunderstorm, beautiful thunderstorm happening in the background on FleetCam, if I could speak. But yeah, Chris G gave us a little input that there was a storm to the north that Falcon 9 just barely flew over today. There's some more lightning right there, but yeah, Florida, very stormy place. And from Remy here, 10 pounds or 10 euros, saying another day, another launch. Here's a couple bucks for the fog penetrating camera fund. Oh, we appreciate that. And Elizabeth here, new membership. We appreciate that, Elizabeth. Again, thank you to all our members and all our super chats. We really appreciate all the support here. Really keeps us running and it keeps us able to bring you live streams just like this. And Daniel Thornton here. Apologies for butchering your name. $20 super chat saying great coverage of 3 Falcon 9 launches in the past 2 days. Thank you, NSF. And thank you, Daniel. We really appreciate that. 5 pounds here from from Dale saying get Thomas a beer. Thomas Beer Fund, I guess, has just started. So very cool there. And from Ryan here saying, you guys joke about it not being centered, but Super Heavy cannot afford to be more than 2 to 3 feet off perfect. Yeah, that's a good point there, right, Adrian? We can't. Super Heavy needs to be perfectly aligned, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to land in a tower, you shouldn't be 3 feet. Like, it has some wiggle room. Stop chopsticks can also probably move a bit, but it shouldn't. Like, it's a precise launch infrastructure, and that will be fun to do.
Yeah. And last but not least here from Rick, $5 super chat saying they were able to see the entry burn from their backyard in North Carolina. Awesome. That's awesome. That's great to see. And I bet I could have seen it here from too in Pennsylvania, but glad to see that you got it there. It must have been a beautiful sight there. But that wraps up our super chat queue. But also, we'd like to do a quick plug of our store, nasaspaceflight.com/shop. Now, this is a great place where you can purchase merch, shirts, hats, posters, and prints of a lot of our cool things. A lot of cool shirt designs there, but also we have some prints. We have some hats. We have some mouse pads, bunch of things. We have mugs, pillows, anything you can desire, space related, NASA spaceflight related. And you can see there are some beautiful shots of not just Starship, but Starhopper and Falcon 9 landing. Great selection there on our website. And that, again, along with super chats and memberships, is a great way to support live streams like this. So again, thank you very much for everyone who supported us. And thank you for everyone who tuned in tonight to watch another Falcon 9 launch, the third in 36 hours, which is ridiculous to say. Very exciting launch to wrap up a very busy weekend for SpaceX. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in for the launch of Globalstar-FM15. Thanks for watching. I have been Ian Atkinson, your host tonight. I was joined by Adrian. How was the launch, Adrian?
I loved it. I loved every second of it, and I loved the plume shot. That will always be my favorite.
Oh yeah, the Max Q plume. That's always gorgeous to see. But yeah, we're
Yes.
joined by Adrian. We're also joined by Chris Gebhardt, assistant managing editor for NASA Spaceflight, as well as Thomas Berghardt in the field doing the tracking, and Julia Bergeron taking some shots out there in Cape Canaveral. But once again, everyone, thank you very much for watching. We appreciate you tuning in tonight at the end of a very busy weekend for SpaceX. We hope you have a great night and a great rest of your weekend. Thanks again for watching.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
AM EDT pressure looks good. Doubling up. Water roll with Atlantis.
Water towers can fly!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight downside, FD off. Say again, FD off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.